Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel. What we're still calling work in progress. However, even though we're work in progress and I'm kind of watching to see how this wants to evolve, this channel, what direction it wants to take, I'm very much of the mindset still to have conversations with people just like you and me, everyday people, about their stories of their life's journey that they can share. And the purpose of the sharing is really to help others, to help one another. I believe the more that we can share with one another, the more we begin to see how we're much more alike than not alike. So if this idea appeals to you, I want you to know that my contact information is right below this video. So if you would like to have a conversation with me, please just click on that and let's see where that can go. So I know I say this always at the beginning of a video, but I want to make sure that in case somebody's listening that would like to get into a conversation with me, that just in case they don't stay till the end, at least they know this at the beginning. Okie dokie, so that's my commercial for today. Today I want to talk about something I've talked about before, but it's a much bigger subject or conversation than just one or two videos can really illuminate what this is really about, and it's what we call triggers. So what is a trigger? Well, if you, anytime when you have a reaction to something outside of yourself, could be anything. It could be somebody says something to you and you have a reaction to it, usually a negative reaction is what we're talking about, or an emotion around it, or somebody, you know, the normal, the typical one, I guess we could say. Someone cuts you off on the freeway and you get angry. You know, these triggers or these reactions can happen all day long. They do. But oftentimes we're oblivious. We're not even aware that we're reacting unless it really is something that's punched us much harder than, let's say, getting cut off on the freeway. When I say punched us, what I mean is it's triggered something much more of a reactive behavior from us. Now, we all have triggers, and they began when we're young, very young. You know, growing up, it comes from beliefs and from the programming that we go through, from our parents, from our teachers, all the stuff that we start to believe about life that is really things that they're not our beliefs, they're things that we've learned or picked up from our culture, from, again, from parents, from siblings, from teachers, to TV, to all kinds of ways that we begin to form this, I'm going to call it inner behavior, or inner, oftentimes they're traumas. They can be a traumatic situation, or they're wounds where we've been you know, in hurt, or in situations that caused us a lot of pain. It's just not like there's only one trigger. There's many, many triggers, and we collect these, as I said, from childhood, and continue to collect them really throughout our life, so to speak. Unless we begin to get aware that we have these triggers, we begin to really start to explore and examine what are our particular triggers. In other words, what type of reaction do I have to certain circumstances or people or situations, etc. Because here's the deal. You can't have a reaction or a trigger unless it's inside, unless it's something that you took on, that you grew up with, as I've said. It can't be just something that happenstance out there and all of a sudden you decide to have a reaction. It doesn't work that way. A lot of things can happen out there, and I may have a reaction and you may absolutely not have one. So you see, we each are programmed, and our belief systems and all of the things that we bring with us within are very different from one another, and, you know, obviously there's similar ones as well. The secret, if you want to call it that, to really discovering on a deeper level what is going on takes a lot of focus and a lot of desire and willingness to want to learn what makes us tick. Here's the thing with these triggers. They're not fulfilling. It's not how we want to be, and they can keep us trapped in many ways. They can stop us from doing certain things. They can keep us kind of on a, you know, hooked, you know, going around and around like, you know, on a loop, in a loop of certain situations. It can make us want to maybe protest at times because we have this trigger. In other words, every reaction, there's no exception to this rule, every reaction that one has, I have, you have, is a trigger getting literally triggered, you know, like awoken for the moment. And it has to be within us, internally, something that we've taken on, again, belief systems, programming of a way something should be, what's right, what's wrong, what's happy, what's sad, appropriate, not appropriate, the way to do something, the way not to do something. Think about maybe when you have a conversation with someone, or you hear something even on the news, in your mind you may hear yourself going, no, that's not true, or I don't agree with that, or one way or another having a conflict in a way from something that you're hearing. Now, these things are subtle, and the reason they're subtle is because we're hypnotized in a way, so used to having this be a part of our structure, a part of who we think we are, that it just seems kind of like normal, you know, like, of course I would be upset over this. And in fact, when we do get upset, when we have let's say a negative reaction to something, we bring along with that an entire story of why we're right and someone else is wrong, or an idea is wrong, or a law that's been passed is wrong, or whatever. It's we're right, they're wrong, here's what I know, and here's why. And then we can tend to talk about why my way is the better way. While we're doing this, we're completely oblivious to the fact that the only reason that we're into this conversation, having this reaction, is because it's within us. It's something we've learned, we believe, we whatever, throughout our childhood. And they usually say by the age of 7 or 8, most of our behavior and beliefs around things are already in place. Obviously, we take on a few here and there as time goes on, for sure. But the ones that really get ingrained and kind of just hidden in a way are the ones in early childhood, the ones from our family. It could even be from generations in the past, way in the past. Just ideas that have been passed down that nobody questions. Nobody wonders, is this true? Is this still right? So you see, it's very, very subtle. Yet it keeps us stuck. Because as long as we have these wounds, let's call them, they can be wounds, it can be something traumatic that's happened in our life. It can be something around our culture, something around maybe what we've learned from teachers. It comes from all over the place. It really does. What we don't get is there's something inside of us holding on very strongly to this way of believing and then this way of reacting. Now, when something goes on out in the outer world and you don't feel anything about it, you don't need to react, you don't have any kind of a charge over it, that's simply because you don't have this within, right? So, you know, kind of just passes by. The challenge is to notice when you actually are having a reaction, because this is where the subtle difference comes in. So you could think that maybe you're just not having a reaction because maybe for the more, what do I want to say, benign kind of beliefs that we have, maybe our reaction is minor, or maybe it happens within, but we don't express it or barely notice it. So that could seem like, oh, I don't have a reaction to that because that's not part of my belief system, etc. But it could be. So again, we have to get very, very like intending an intention. We have to get an intention to really take a deep, deep look within to identify these beliefs, these triggers. And when we do this, it is amazing. Now, here's what happens to me a lot of times. I get a trigger and I'm not aware enough, I'm not awake enough to really say, okay, this is a trigger. Instead, I'm off on running with the emotion involved in it. So I'm feeling the emotions. I'm in my mind having the conversation of what's going on and why this is wrong, and anybody would agree with me, and if they knew, and if I explained this to somebody, they'd say, oh yeah, I can see where you're coming from. And we could even get a group, and people can do that, they do, people to go against something, to change something, to fight against something, to march against something. And so we gather people that are like-minded, so to speak, that will join us in our particular theme, whatever that is, the trigger. Or it's a very it's such a personal trigger that you're not going out there to try to get others. You're not recruiting anybody to be a part of this program. It's just your own. So here's what I find is when I notice, if I can't see the trigger in the very beginning, which oftentimes we just can't because we're programmed, we're caught up into this automatic way of reacting. But what we can become more easily aware of is our emotions or our upset, our attitude about something going on that's happened, you know? A phone call could come in. That could happen. It could even happen when you're just on social media and reading something and you start to have this emotional or a reaction that maybe you feel angry or like, wow, how can they do that? Or what's going on? What's wrong with people? That kind of thing. Even then, when you notice that you get off into that track, let's call it, because it's like runs on a track in a way. We run on a track with whatever it is that has been going on within. Even then, when that happens, if you can just for a moment stop and ask yourself, is this a trigger? I mean, is this kind of a trigger? I'm feeling really upset about this, but is this a trigger? And you have to really kind of dig in and say, is this a trigger? The answer is always, yes, it is a trigger, right? But individually, we need to really mean it. We can't just say, okay, yeah, it's a trigger, no big deal. No, it is a big deal, because we want to say, all right, where is this trigger coming from? Maybe something that we hold or I hold for, let's say, being unsafe. That's my thing, is I have a lot of triggers about being unsafe, emotionally unsafe, physically unsafe for sure as well. Financially unsafe, all the unsafes. I was lucky enough to have all of those beliefs when I was growing up. So those are triggers for me, and it comes in a variety of sizes and intensity. So all I need to do, though, is notice that, okay, I am feeling unsafe. I'm triggered. I'm feeling unsafe. And then when we can get just to a little bit of a quiet spot, a quiet place, start inquiring within, what is this about? What is this trigger about? You know, why am I feeling this? And a lot of things happen as we do this. First of all, we quit focusing on the outer. We quit focusing on the person that said something to us, or we quit focusing on the person that we was doing something that we really don't like or we don't want. We don't focus on the story, in other words. The story starts to diminish in a way. The whole story about what is going on that is bad, what is going on that's wrong, what is going on that is upsetting me, period. And so then when we can do that, the energy drops, meaning we're not so wired, we're not so crazed about whatever the situation is. And just by having that happen, that allows us to begin to kind of calm the energy down and begin to actually get clear on where is this trigger coming from. It's coming from someplace, right? Within. And so once we can actually tune into that, then we have an opportunity to work with it. What do I mean by work with it? It means, one, notice it, accept it, allow it. Notice it, accept it, and allow it. So first is noticing, okay, trigger. Accept it. That's what's going on. It's a fact. I'm feeling upset because yada yada, da-di-da, whatever, said something. And then we can allow it, the energy of it, to just be there, because the energy will not be nearly as strong as it was at the beginning of the whole event happening. And then we just allow it, and by allowing it, it actually releases it. And so we're not apt to be so triggered the next time. Or maybe it's going to take, for me, it can take sometimes 5 or 10 times of being triggered with the same thing, particularly if it's really something that I've really taken on, right? I've really held on to. So it varies, right? However, what it allows us to do when we can notice, get involved with our own trigger, is we have less and less of them. We have less of the negative, not feel good reactions out there to stuff, to junk, whatever's going on, because we've been able to work with it within, to heal it, so to speak, release it, let go of these beliefs that no longer serve us. You know, and another way to work with this is through automatic writing. Start to write about what it is you're feeling and where that you believe this trigger is coming from, and start to, it's like almost a dialogue with the trigger. This trigger wants to be released from within just as much as you'd like to get rid of it, right? Because it's never a positive. It never, ever is a positive. I mean, you can be, you know, standing, pounding the table, saying, this is the way, the truth, and this is the way this should be, and, you know, this is inappropriate, and so forth. But that's not going to get you anywhere. It's just not. It just keeps you stuck. So that's where a lot of us stay, is stuck with these triggers. And man, they can be really, really subtle. I've seen this so many times for myself. Now I always have to put in a little bit of a warning here. I don't know what else to call it, or what to watch out for. So if somebody is absolutely being emotionally abusive to you, notice the trigger. That's the first thing. But this doesn't mean when you get a trigger that you roll over, become a doormat, allow all this stuff, this bad stuff to happen to you. No, it's not like that, but at least you begin to come from that place of saying, okay, this is a trigger. Because at the same time it's a trigger, as strange as this sounds, there's a vibration to this trigger. And there are times where we will attract that situation that we have a trigger about. So being emotionally abused, we may attract someone or something in our life in the now time, in the now moment, that will be emotionally abusive and trigger us in that way. And then in that case, the trigger is really used to point out, no, I've been here, done that, I don't want to do it, I'm going to release it. So in other words, this isn't about just, everything is fine, no matter what happens. Oh, it's just a trigger, so no matter what, emotional abuse, physical abuse, any kind of abuse, no biggie. No, not at all. But it is noticing you've got the trigger in you, and then you do what you have to do to remove yourself from a bad situation, right? And that's a whole other conversation, because we know that there's people, oftentimes women, who get kind of stuck in this, literally in a physical abusive relationship or an emotional abusive relationship, and they can't get out, or they feel they can't. And what happens through these abusive relationships is one begins to lose their self-worth. They can become a doormat. They suffer tremendously through this type of behavior. So that's why it's also good to, as early on as we can, to be able to get in touch with these triggers, because that is somewhat of a protection, so that we're not going to blindly walk in to an emotional abusive relationship. Obviously there's other things that you don't want to stand besides emotionally abusive, but that's a big one out there today. And so it's physical abuse. This is the thing that sometimes these type of triggers will cause us to become an alcoholic, or not become the alcoholic thing is kind of there, but to want to numb ourselves from all these feelings. So that's where drugs and alcohol can come in. Overeating can come in. It's like a domino effect, these triggers. One thing can kind of trigger another thing, and pretty soon we're kind of lost in no man's land. But as we mature into these ideas of, whatever is happening, whatever my upset's about, has already been positioned in me through a belief, and those beliefs come in all the different ways, through a culture, through what we call programming, way to behave, or what's right, what's wrong, that thing. This is right, that's wrong. We all have it, that's not hard to understand. The thing that is important in all this is beginning to practice watching ourselves in a reactive mode, and then seeking the answer within of what's going on, what's the trigger that's causing me to react in this way. This is such a basic but such an important step, particularly in what's going on right now as we're trying to move through this human evolution, through this human consciousness of evolution, so that we can get to a place where none of this really exists. I was thinking today, I don't listen to the news. I just don't. I realized that certainly during the pandemic. But even before, I've always been very cautious of listening to all the negativity. But the one thing that I'm hooked on is weather. I know I've talked about this before, and I'm not going to go into detail, but weather is important to me. So I will watch the weather report on TV. And while I'm trying to get to the weather report, there's news in between. And so today I knew the weather was going to come up in just a few moments. But in those few moments was the talk of all the news, which was all crime related. Everything was negative, bad. These people got shot. This is going on there, negative. The guy they found guilty, all negativity, right? Of all the bad crap that goes on all the time. And that's what the news is about. You know, it can be political, it can be localized to things that are going on, but that's what people are addicted to listening to. That's what causes somebody to turn that to that particular channel on the TV. And I started thinking about this, and I thought, you know, we've just become totally unaware in a way, totally hypnotized, non-reactive to all of this horrendous crap that's going on out there. This horrendous way that humans are behaving. I mean, if you just listen to less than 5 minutes of a newscast, this is what you'll hear about. And then a little bit sprinkled in between, maybe a fun event that's going to happen in the Bay Area, or somebody, you know, a new hero, somebody that's done a good thing. They'll sprinkle a little bit of that in, but a little tiny bit, you know. The rest is all about the horrendous things that are going on, and you know, we've become hypnotized to believing, oh, it's a norm. This is just normal now. Yeah, just normal. So through this evolution that we're attempting, and hopefully we'll succeed at moving through, we will move to a completely different vibration where we are not accepting of this stuff, and then it doesn't happen. I'm not talking about going to war or going to fights. We're already in all that. I'm talking about having a different vibration going on. This is what we're headed towards. This is what we're really wanting to succeed at doing, so that none of that even exists, and that we're living in a much different world of caring about one another and about, you know, loving one another, and wanting to be having a quality of life that is positive and rewarding, and our lives are fulfilling, and there isn't the constant differences of the good and the bad. We're rather, as a collective, we've agreed that we want this higher level of being, this way of being. So right now, in this 3-dimension that we're in, this is the lowest level right now of what is being presented. And to try to navigate through this is really incredibly difficult. But we can't stop trying, and that's why even just, you know, getting aware of our own stuff that's going on through these triggers, that's a huge step forward. Huge. Because then we don't continue to have that happening. So that's why, just as we talk about all these ways to discover what is really going on within and move beyond that, then this is where we come together as a collective of human species to work our way into a different dimension, a different vibration. So that's really what's going on. And if you can think of it that way, I believe that helps us become more motivated, more willing to put the effort in, because it does take effort. It takes a focus, an awareness of what's really going on within us. So I really suggest and hope that if this is making sense to you, and I hope it makes sense, and I hope also it's helping someone out there, to take this a little more seriously, maybe, to, you know, put this in your consciousness. Make an intention to really begin to notice where your triggers are, and then work with it from the inside out. It's really the ticket, from the inside out. So that is it today. it's really close to my heart that we could work through some of this, because I think these triggers are a key. I know they are for me. And I know it's not easy. Believe me, it's not easy, but easy isn't always what we need to look for. You know, maybe we've been too easy, and that's why we find ourselves where we're at. Who knows? But there is a way out. So let's work together and hopefully find that way out. So I just want to remind you, if you did like this video, to please click like and subscribe. And I'd love to hear comments. What do you think? You know, what's been your experience with triggers? Maybe you have some interesting or helping type of ideas of how to deal with these triggers. Yeah, so let's have some conversation going on with it. That would be absolutely fabulous if we could get a conversation about it. And I just want to remind you that that is what I want to do, is start to get people on Zoom where you and I can have a conversation about your particular stories that you could share about your life journey, and you know, or challenges that you've had to go through, or maybe a challenge that you're in right now. But let's start to talk about it and do it just with everyday people. I keep saying everyday people because I don't feel we're hearing the voices of everyday people. Meaning, you don't have to be a guru or a teacher or an author or do retreats or any of this. Teach nothing, just everyday people trying to navigate through this, what now is a very challenging part of our lives. And so that way, as we begin to exchange our ideas and share our stories with one another, we're really able that way to come together as a collective. Many times somebody's going through something, but they don't know someone else might be, and so they don't want to share it. You know, somebody will say, I've been afraid to share this story because I'd be looked at as crazy. A lot of people with now are coming forward that have had near-death experiences, and they share how, you know, they could have the near-death experience 20, 30 years ago, and they were afraid to share it. Now they're sharing it so others can come forward, and that's exactly what's happening. And that's just near-death experiencers. What about just everyday challenges that we have, and we've been able to work through those? That would work the same way, where we can have people that are really struggling, maybe considering suicide, who knows, that they can come forward now because somebody else shared it. So that's what I'd like to see. And if you resonate with what I'm talking about, then my contact information is below this video, and just get in contact with me, and let's see where we can go from there. So in the meantime, be kind to yourself. I'm working on that as well, and I know I say it each time, but I think it's important. I really do, just like everything else that we're talking about, I think is important. When I say be kind, it's not just to yourself, obviously to others. So maybe that could become the norm as well, that we become, the normal is to be kind to ourselves, be kind to others. Wow, what would that be like, huh? Alrighty, until next time, take care. And I'm going to click this thing off like they do each and every time, and it always takes me 2 to 3 clicks, and I don't know why. But I'm going to try in 1 click today. Let's see what happens.